Welcome everybody to another episode of CEOpen Mic. Today my guest is a person who has been creating space for the companies from our industry to interact with each other, a person who's been writing and talking about iGaming for years, and a person who only recently decided to go even deeper and created a launchpad for startups that will shape the future of iGaming. Sue Schneider, hi.
Hello there. You did it.
Is it more or less correct what I said?
Yes, that's pretty accurate.
So let's jump into the first part of it. You creating space for the gaming, night gaming, gambling companies because you were the one of the first people to create physical events for the companies from our industry, right?
Yeah, I actually started in the industry in 1995, forever ago. And in looking in hindsight, I had a company with a partner that was called Rolling Good Times Online. And we didn't know what to call it then, but it was really probably one of the first affiliate sites.
Mhm.
And then, so it was a consumer oriented thing. And my dirty little secret is I don't gamble. So for me to be trying to edit articles about how to beat, the house at blackjack or whatever, just it wasn't a good match for me. But during that time, we started iGaming News, which was a B2B industry publication. And in '99, we kind of split up the company. I took the B2B side and started working with during the time we had Rolling Good Times Online, I started working with some other people that were very early on trying to do conferences for internet gaming. And so we would help them with marketing and bring people there. And then the more we thought about it, the more we thought, we can do this just as well as these guys do. We're very, very deep in the industry. So in '99, we started an event in Canada that was called Global iGaming Summit and Expo, GIGSY. And went on after that to developed about 7 different events. We did one that we did as a joint venture with Clarion that runs ICE that was called European iGaming. We did World Poker Congress. We had a number of events, which we subsequently in 2006 sold to Clarion. So my interest in the event side of it goes very deep after we worked with them for 3 years after we sold, and then after that, I got involved with some other events, one called iGaming North America in Las Vegas, one called Malta iGaming Seminar, MIGS in Malta. So I've been in the events side and the publication side of the industry for a long time and have watched it grow. And it's just been an amazing thing to watch.
I think, well, even from my perspective, I've been attending ICE for roughly around 10 years and ICE and surrounding events. And majority of the people who listen to us today, they don't really remember the time before all those big events like SBC or ICE were actually in place. And I think majority of the people now, they're kind of used to the routine that, internet is all over the place. You are in constant contact with everybody you've met on the conference, and that you basically go to the conference to meet the people you already know, and sometimes just meet the new people. But the core of being in a conference is basically see the face of the person you've been messaging with for weeks or months. But what was the motivation back then in 1995 or even 2000s? Like the internet was way different then, and iGaming, online gambling was way different then.
It was. There were very, very few companies in it. And ironically, a lot of them now, even today, will kind of argue over who was in first, whether it was on the casino side or the sports betting side. But there were very,
Uh-huh.
very few. And it was interesting to me because with the internet coming in, I mean, we were immediately dealing with people in South Africa and Europe and Australia and all over the place. So it was kind of a natural um, progression, I think, from dealing with all these people and working with them online to finding a way for them to come together. So it's been a really interesting process, and trade show politics among all of them has been interesting over the years because now it's pretty crowded. I mean, there are a lot of event organizers out there, whether it's from smaller ones to all the way to the big gigantic ones. So it's been interesting to watch over the years. I've spent the last 6 years helping the folks at SBC develop things on this side of the pond, because in 2018, when the Supreme Court decision came down that allowed the states to determine if they wanted to do sports betting, a lot of my old staff was like, let's do it again. And I'm like, no. Which, kind of led me to get with my friends at SBC and said, if you're going to do something over here, I'll help you out. So I've done that for really the past 6 years or so to help them build out the 4 events that they had over here, now to 3, because they're combining the LATAM and the North American event into one called Americas. So it's been, it's been a really interesting ride to watch that grow over the years. And it was a real challenge. The real reason I was glad that I didn't jump off and do it on my own is I don't think I would have weathered. I don't think I would have weathered the whole COVID thing, which basically put a halt for 2 years to any in-person events. So I don't think I would have weathered that well on my own, because they just were very nimble about it. And so it allowed them to kind of hit the ground running when the time came.
But let's focus on the people who attend these kind of shows. Would you see the change in their motivations over time? I mean, I can imagine, that's just my imagination, but I can imagine that, back 20 years ago, everybody would go to these kind of shows just to actually see the things and touch the things, some kind of physical machines or, whatever. And right now, of course, it happens as well. But since more and more things are pushed to online, well, my impression of this is that you go there basically to meet people and bond more with the people you kind of already know. And that factor of learning something new from the industry or about the industry is not that significant anymore. But again, that's just my impression. So I just wanted to...
Well, I think, first of all, you have to keep in mind that when I started doing it, there was no regulation. There was no regulation. And it was truly the Wild West. And it was much more fun, to be honest, because it was not, it wasn't all corporate. It was a lot of very, very smart, talented entrepreneurs that were just all making it up as they went along. So, that was one thing. And then part of what we were trying to do was to bring in the aspects, not just the private sector industry, but the regulators, the lottery folks, the policymakers, the legislators that are putting together the laws that the regulators then implement. So the intent is to try to build as much controversy and as much learning as you can. And I think the other thing, to your point about the conference content, is it's different, I think, more on this side of the pond, to be honest, because I know with the SBC folks, when they first came over here, it's like, wow, look, everybody shows up to the conferences and listens. And, whereas I think for some reason, I don't know why, but in Europe, it doesn't seem like that conference content is quite as accepted and kind of relished by the attendees as it might be over here. I don't know why that is, but it's a little different in geographic regions. We used to do an event it started out in Australia. Actually, the first 2 we did were in the outback, believe it or not, in Alice Springs in the Northern Territories. Then we moved it to Sydney, and then we subsequently moved it to Macau as an Australasian, regional show. And that one was the same way. I mean, people just were craving information on, how is this going to work and what are the best ways to do it, and, coming up with new ideas, new products, all that. So I think there are some regional differences in how they make use of those events. But, I think it became clear after COVID that people really were very, very interested in keeping that face-to-face component to what they were doing. You can go so far with Zoom. And
better. You're talking to the guy who's basically glued to the screen of his phone.
Yeah.
Yet, whenever I have the opportunity to talk face to face with whoever, partners, clients, or whatever, I just prefer to do it. It feels better. It feels so real, right?
Plus, our industry knows how to have fun. So that's part of it. We play hard. We do that as part of getting to know everybody. So that part's been fun. And that's where I really did love my time with SBC, because they did a lot of activations. I mean, you're out on a football field trying to kick a football, things like that, which I think are just
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
really fun.
yeah.
We used to have crazy events with Gigsy. For most of the years, we went back and forth between Montreal and Toronto, and we had some pretty crazy gatherings there. So that part
And
that's always fun.
with with all your experience, organizing, attending, I suppose you've attended more conferences than any other guest that I had in the show here. What's your strategy for any kind of event like that? I mean, there are people who simply go for a 2, 3, 4 days party and are basically drunk all day long, and they come back, they barely remember what happened.
Right.
Good for them. I mean, if that makes them happy, why not? There are people who are like very official. They go to the main event during the day, and then when it comes to the night event, there's maybe one dinner, not much alcohol, simply talking and doing business. Let me put it that way. What's your strategy for that?
Well, the first strategy is wear comfortable shoes. Nobody says that enough, but that's a
True.
must. I have someone that used to work with me, and she would go get a new pair of high heels before a show, and she was miserable. So I was like, please stop doing that. But I think it really kind of depends on the person. A lot of people, like you said, are there to kind of reinforce their relationships with people that they already have, which is great. I tend to like to go to things where I don't know a lot of people because I
Mhm.
enjoy meeting new people in the industry, and to me, that's the only way you can kind of keep a pulse on what's going on, particularly as it relates to what we're doing now related to startups. Because as you're not going to get that from the big companies. A lot of the big companies just are not that involved with innovative efforts, which is one of the
Mhm.
reasons that we've tried to pull together what we're doing because we want to help foster that, and however whatever way it's going to take to see more of that. But I think unless you're really getting out and talking to new people, the salespeople tend to do that, or business development people tend to do that. But it's something I would encourage everybody to do, is to the old standby of when you go into a meeting room, pick a table where you don't know anybody. I mean,
Mhm.
those are simple tools that have been around for decades,
Mhm.
but a lot of people don't take advantage of that. So I just think it's personal preference, but we'll see.
Well, my personal problem is that whenever, if you randomly bump on a person on any kind of evening event, for a while you don't really know who the person is, right? That could be anybody. I noticed that salespeople or account managers or however you want to call them, they tend to glue to you. They tend to speak a lot. They tend to like not let you go. And a couple of times I found myself basically spending majority of the evening talking to the person who, well, maybe not always have anything interesting really to say or anything to learn from. More like getting some pre-cooked agenda, being pushed some sales. And frankly speaking, I have to admit that my personal problem is that I don't have a good way to walk away
Extract
nicely.
yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I probably shouldn't be saying this one, but I know when I had my company, we had a code word, so that if one of the staff came up and we said the code word, they were like, "Oh, somebody needs to talk to you." So it's I won't tell you what the code word or the code phrase was, but we did have that. So that's
That's a
teamwork.
good. That's a good thing. Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely gonna implement it. Um, Let me get back to you said that when you were starting, the industry wasn't really regulated, and I hear a lot right now that if you try to operate on a regulated market, it's getting more and more difficult. Not only because you gotta conform to all the regulations, but the problem is that if you play by the book, then your customers they are forced to go through the processes which are getting longer and longer, getting more and more complex, getting more and more tiring for the people
Expensive.
and expensive. And then you have all that gray market. They don't need this kind of stuff. And I tend to hear more and more that people who are wishing to play on a legal site, they are being pushed to those gray areas where nothing's safe, nothing's like we all know. But again, that's my impression, and you're the guest here, so I wanted to see your opinion about that.
Well, I think if you look even globally, there's been so many countries and jurisdictions that have now legalized. I mean, it's and you start out with a gold rush because of that. I mean, look at Brazil; they're now in gold rush mode. The U.S., for example, for the sports betting side, we're 6 years in. It's the shakeouts coming. People are like, "Oh, this isn't sustainable. I have to get out of it." Um, from a regulatory side, I wish that regulators would look more at how they can help new ideas coming in. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to startup stuff because it's so top of mind with us. But here in the U.S., for example, if you want to get into say you have a fantasy sports product that's new, because we're working with somebody that's got that, and if you say, okay, I want to go into these 15 states, when you add up what the application costs are, what the taxation is, all that kind of stuff, I mean, it really kind of restrains them from even being able to move forward because of the cost of it. And you have entrenched companies that are like, they're not necessarily interested in seeing new ideas because they don't really want additional competition. So it's a delicate balance, and sometimes it can really get out of whack. And then, you have other jurisdictions, where they're going back and revisiting this. I mean, if you look at some of the African countries, they're now going back and trying to take a look at, did we do this right? Or how do we need to adapt it so it is more commercially friendly? I still have this guy's paper. There was a regulator in New Zealand that in the 90s said iGaming in particular is always going to have to be almost a partnership, because the regulatory side will never be able to keep up with the innovations on the tech side. And I think he was right. I mean, who knew 20 something years later that he would have been accurate in that? But yet I think a lot of the government side feels like they're at risk if they try to look at it as a partnership. Should they be more, I don't know what the right term would be, but do they want to have a firewall in there because they don't want to be, have people complaining that, oh, you're just, supporting the industry without really looking at what it's doing for the government or for its constituents. So it gets complicated really quickly.
Yeah, it does. And frankly speaking, from my perspective, I cannot name any single jurisdiction where I would say that's the place where it works just well. And even if there's this tiny little moment in time where everything looks kind of balanced, then the next year or even, I don't know, 3 years later, it's all like mess again. Do you know any particular jurisdiction right now that you would say, yeah, that's a way to go?
Well, I mean, I think there are many that have pieces of it that would be good. Is there one that really knocks it out of the park? I'm not sure I could really point to one, because they're all different, and they each have their own downfall with certain pieces of it. What I think is unfortunate and not a surprise is that, like any vice, governors, legislators, whatever the title would be, feel like this is an easy thing. The governor of Ohio is trying to go from a 20% to a 40% tax rate for iGaming. And that's the kind of stuff. We're an easy target when they are feeling the pinch financially and want to start raising revenue. So, but that comes with the territory. I mean, I'm sure it's the same with tobacco, alcohol, you name the vice. They're all at risk of that.
Yeah. My favorite was, I think that was South Africa. I'm not sure now. Africa for sure, definitely, but probably South Africa, where they roll out some kind of rules. Then they saw, the regulators, they saw that the industry is making pretty decent money, so they basically made the rules even more strict, like higher taxes and all that, and they basically killed the market. So then again, they realized that, hey, if the market is killed, that makes the gray market even bigger, and we are not getting any money from taxes.
Yeah, nor are there player protections.
Yeah, and basically they were playing this kind of game for years, and basically killing any kind of healthy competition on the market.
Mm-hmm. I can't point to, like, for example, when Colorado here in the U.S. was getting started, they did a lot of I forgot what they called it, but they did a lot of dialogue with industry, whether it's suppliers or operators that wanted to come in to try to figure out what is a good balance of regulation that's not going to kill you, but
Mhm.
will meet our goals, which is typically jobs, tax revenue, that and player protection. So those are the kind of things that I think are important to do. I'm in the state of Missouri. I'm near St. Louis. We just passed it barely for sports betting in November, and the regulators here, and they've actually been working on it in anticipation of it passing, so they're ready to put their regulations out
Mhm.
for comments and things like that. So
Mhm.
I think the more that gets done where there's a dialogue there, it will at least try to help with coming up with something that's not going to be too onerous and restrictive, because you know we're an easy target, but there are a lot of operators that aren't that profitable oddly enough, because they spend a lot. They spend a lot on marketing. So you don't have a whole lot to play with in some cases.
And I was surprised to actually to learn that I've learned that a couple of years ago that being an operator on this market is not really the easiest money on the market.
Yeah, especially
Uh,
on the sports betting side, it's small.
I want to focus on you as a person a little bit, because you said that in 2006 you exited the company to
Mhm.
Clarion, right? What was your motivation? Why did you do it?
I thought the timing was right, and also there was discussion here of raising capital gains tax, and I mean there were those kind of considerations that came into play, and because we were in the business, we kind of knew who the prospective buyers might be, and we had a brokerage business as part of our company, so like I was kind of used to the whole, uh, you know, selling businesses in the industry because we did that
Right.
ourselves. But
Okay.
it's really, I was just ready to do it. I mean, you have to keep in mind, I'm first of all I'm old. I just turned 74 when I Clarion. Sold to Clarion. I was what was I? I was 56, 55. So,
Hmm.
I was like, oh, I'm done. And I
Hmm.
can't seem to be done. So, I got involved with these two other ones, and then I helped SBC, and I'm still not done. So started this new endeavor with two friends of mine. So it's an addiction that I have. I really do enjoy the industry. I love watching it. And,
Uh-huh.
it, retirement's going to have to catch me because I'm not ready yet.
It's simply like today. The next question I had on my list was, with all the opportunities you're probably being offered every single day now, considering your experience and your heritage, you decided to set up a startup basically, which means, contrary to what newspapers say, a startup means a lot of work, not always a lot of money, rarely a lot of money, a lot of struggle, lots of stress, and pretty low chance of being really successful, which, comparing to being a director in whatever big brand I would put here, they would probably be happy to have you as a director. You choose the difficult path. Why would you do it?
I ask
It
myself
doesn't
that
make any sense.
periodically. um, well, I love starting things.
Okay.
And not only are we a startup, but we work with startups. So
Hmm.
that part is super exciting to me, is trying to help people figure out, where would I fit in the industry? How do I get there? Who do I need to ally with? I always say, more importantly, because of our tenure in the industry, who not to partner with.
Hmm.
It's not quite as bad as it used to be in terms of a lot of people that are super sketchy, but I always call this industry a small town. It's fairly easy
It
to
is.
know who's who and
It is.
whether they're people you want to do business with.
Yeah.
So I just enjoy the front end of things. Once it gets into like maintenance end of the company, it's not as fun to me. So um, that's why I
So
did it.
you.
I don't know. I'm crazy, maybe. I don't know.
So
But I
are
have two
you are
great
you just
partners, and together the three of us have 80 years in the iGaming industry among the three of us. So, and we were all kind of hitting the same spot. We were ready for something different, new. So here we are. We're doing it.
Mhm.
And what we're
So.
doing is working with startups. We really have a bent toward trying to help underrepresented founders, because there aren't a lot of women, there aren't a lot of minority founders in the industry. So that's, I mean, we're working with others that maybe don't fit that category, but that's who we're really trying to get in there. So it's really more something that we've wanted to support for a long time. So we're just doing it.
So it's not really a PR stunt. You're really trying to help people, basically.
Well, help founders. I mean, they're, having done this a couple of times myself, I
Mhm.
know how hard it can be. And I know that if you have an adequate support system, you can, move forward. And one of the things that I didn't really talk about that we are going to do, I'm kind of jumping ahead on your questions, but we're built, excuse me, we're building um, a platform, an online platform for the startup community. So it's going to be, everybody. It's going to be the startups, all, not just the ones we work with, but all of them. It's going to be investors. It'll be suppliers. It'll be tech developers. It'll be regulators. We want to have a really vibrant support network, and we felt like that was a good way to do that. Have trainings, have things like that people, very concrete things that people can use and then reach out to, because I think there's a really good base of support for innovation in the industry, but it's not very structured at this point. So,
Well, I can definitely think of one company that would like to join the platform.
all right,
As a matter of fact, I founded one.
there you go.
Let, so let's talk about that. No, but somewhere in the meantime, you said that you enjoy like the front end of the company, like building something new. But when it comes to the maintenance, whoops, when it comes to the maintenance and all that, let me put it that way, boring as hell.
Yeah,
Work which is to be done under the hood, not so much. Would you say you are not a good manager? Is that what you're saying? You don't
no,
want to
not at
manage things?
all. No, no,
Yeah.
because I really, when I had my business, I loved doing that, and I had a
Hmm.
specific management style that really people need to be self starters when they come in, because I'm going to give you the broad outline of what you need to do, and then you need to run with it.
Hmm.
So, I wouldn't say that. What I'm saying is, when it comes to spending all your times on planning in
Hmm.
meetings and reports, that's where you lose me. I hate that part. So I don't think it really has
Understand.
anything to do with management style as much as a hate for paperwork.
Hmm.
I've heard people say, look, do you want me to go out and sell, or do you want me to make a plan to sell and sit in a bunch of sales meetings and then,
Hmm.
do a report on what I sold or didn't sell? I could take all of that time and be out selling. So it's just a perspective on how I view things with what I think would be a successful company. I
And
mean,
that's
I know you
exactly
get
the
to a
problem.
certain level where you have to have that stuff, but that's where I start opting out. It's just boring.
Well, I'm not really talking about Defy the Odds right now because how many people do you have at the moment? I suppose you are on the very
We have
early
three
stage right now.
founders, and we have one staff person that works with us at this point.
Right.
We're
Okay.
little.
So that's not a
And I,
huge
I don't see us
organization yet.
getting real big, to be honest with you, because that's not really, that's not really the intent.
Yeah, I tend to hear that more and more often that having more people is not really a way to go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do agree. But I wanted to say that that's exactly my problem now. That I'm being stuck. I mean, in my company, I'm being stuck with basically doing the internal stuff, which in some way it does push the things forward. But as a matter of fact, my time would be used so much better if I was just out there in the wild, talking to people, meeting with people, spreading the word and all that. But then again, my managers they tend to understand it, but they say okay, but it doesn't mean that that job doesn't have to be done. I mean, that internal stuff it still has to be done. So if you manage to build it in such a way that it's still being done while you are far away, doing your things, just do it. Of course, do it, but figure out how to do it. And I have no idea. I'm stuck for months now.
Yeah,
How
it,
do
it
you?
is hard.
Yeah.
And there are more tools with that. I mean, you have
Mhm.
to figure that when I was doing it, we thought it was great that there was an innovation called the BlackBerry, where we didn't even have to be in the office and we could still be getting stuff done. So that I'm talking way back. But yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I think it's something that everybody struggles with as they grow their company. I mean, my company never got that big. I was always under 20 people. So that was
Right.
real doable. I mean, people that
Yeah.
get up to 100, 2,000. I mean, some of these huge companies are like 6,000
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
I just
Mhm.
can't even imagine that. It just sounds like a nightmare to me.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think it's what your personal preference is, and also what your management style is. Like, what's your management style?
Well,
That's a
if you
question.
if you ask me, if you ask me what my management style, I would say it's chaotic, and trying to randomly do things and just see what sticks.
Yeah.
um,
We
but
did a
yeah,
fair amount of that in my company. I mean, we tried way back when to do a virtual marketplace for the industry and things like that. I mean, and we were way too early for one thing. But it is interesting to give all those things a try. I will tell you, when you get to due diligence on selling, though, it turns around and bites you in the butt, because now we had 100 contracts with all these people that where we were going to do this virtual marketplace, and we had to terminate everyone.
hmm
Are things like, well, one of the things I found most interesting on during the due diligence was, they did a SWOT analysis, and they had that we ran lean. I mean, we did a lot of stuff for as few people as we had, and that was a weakness in their SWOT analysis. And I'm like,
hmm
why is that a weakness? And it was like, because we can't come in and just make cuts and get a better bottom line. I was like, okay, never thought of that one. So, I mean, you learn when you go through the sales, some things that you thought
hmm
were a good idea that just get very labor intensive when you try to deal
Yeah.
with it.
By the way, I think that's a major difference between founder's mind and the manager's mind. I don't think you could be good at being both at the same time. Uh,
Exactly.
I can clearly see that, whoever I talk to here on the podcast or whoever I meet, in this so-called reality, founders, they tend to be chaotic. They tend to avoid those set structures, and they
Hmm.
tend to create situations where they truly believe at the very beginning, but then after some time they're like, yeah, that's harder than I thought. Let's just ditch it because I have so many other ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
definitely.
interesting. And some are able to make that transition as they grow the company, and some aren't. I
Yeah,
mean, some
I could.
have certain skill level that made a lot of sense at the beginning for them to
Mm.
bring it to a certain point, but then either they need to bring in a different kind of management or whatever to take it to that level, because they may not just innately have that that mind frame on it.
And again, talking to a lot of founders, and well, talking to myself, I'm turning 40, and I do think a lot about the future. That maybe at some point I would sell the company, or maybe at some point I wouldn't have to work so much, and I would be so happy to just have a 6 months holidays and things like that. But you are the working example that even if you did it, you still came back to the business, not because you had to. Well, at least that's my impression. Not because you had to, but you simply wanted to because you missed that adrenaline. Is
Yeah,
it
I
it?
mean, I just think it keeps me young, actually, to be honest. And I think, you if you really like what you do, and if you are excited by a certain portion of it, because again, I like the front end
hmm
loaded stuff in terms of coming up with the ideas. Where do they fit? That sort of thing. And it just really does. I just find it really stimulating and feel like I have something to offer. So, why not do that? But
hmm
not everybody's like that. I mean, I tell a lot of founders to keep your exit in mind as you build it from scratch, because you're not going
Okay.
to want to do this forever. Um,
hmm
and if you keep that in mind, then you can begin to structure even who. I mean, we sold River City Group, which was the name of the events company. Started that in '99, sold it in 2006. So it was about a 7-year run building it up. Um, and I always knew I was going to sell it at some point. I just never really knew when. It just seemed like the good time. And as it turned out, I sold it 3 months before the U.S. Congress passed the UIGEA, which is the restrictions. So I still have folks on the other end of that sale. It was like, did you know that was coming? It was like, no one knew that was coming. So,
Yeah, right.
there are those outside forces that come into play that you don't really have any control
Mhm.
over.
I have so many thoughts right now in my head, but let me stick to
Blurt them out.
uh,
Go ahead.
frankly speaking, I would have to ask you like 5 questions at the same time. So
Okay.
let me just focus on one. That's really interesting for me because with all your experience now, when you decided to again get back to founding your new business and doing all that, with all your experience and with everything that you've seen on the market, how did you really approach building the Defy the Odds? I mean, for instance, do you have like written down strategy for the company? I mean, real paper, written down sentences and pictures and whatnot, or is it more like YOLO? Let's just do it, because we think it's gonna work, so let's just do it.
It's probably a little bit of both of those. My two
Mhm.
partners, Kelly Keene and Paris Smith, and I were all kind of ready to do something different. So Paris invited us down to her house in Curacao. And we actually have a picture that we posted recently of us in her pool looking out at the Caribbean. And that was our inspiration. But there was a big whiteboard in the foreground. And so we knew what we wanted to do. Actually, we wanted to start out doing a fund ourselves. But, it was a situation where it was like, we found out the legalities and the legal expenses with doing that. And it's like, maybe we'll just be the glue instead.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, we definitely have things written down as to how we want to approach this. It's like all the startups we work with, it's constantly evolving and we're constantly pivoting. But that's okay, and again, I don't want to say that we're not in it for the money because we would love to do that, but it's more about the goal of what we're trying to do, which is to get
Mhm.
a little more diversity among the founders that are in the industry and to support them so that they're going to be successful. There's some very, very talented people out there that just, I mean, if you look at like Forbes magazine saying 4% of VC funds go to women, I mean, that kind of stuff
Mhm.
is just kind of appalling. So whatever we can help do to try to help counter that a little bit is what we're shooting for. So we have you certainly don't want to say charitable angle, but just a social angle to
Mhm.
this to try to help some of these founders that may not get the time of day when they go try to talk to VCs. We can call them up on the phone and say, look,
Mhm.
you really need to talk to this person. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to offer. So, and it's
Yeah,
been
that's
fun.
that's.
You talked about why you do things. My prerequisite has always been as long as I'm having fun. I mean, it's a privilege on my part that I get to do that, but it's true. I enjoy what I do, and as long as you get to really have a good time doing it and watch people and companies grow, it's a good time.
Mhm. And do you think, I'm not talking particularly about Defy the Odds, but the moment you stop having fun with whatever you do, would you just stop and sell it, or would you stay in a company because you
Well,
feel like,
my
I don't
my
know,
two partners are considerably younger than I, so they're probably going to write it out a lot longer than I am. Um, you know, I think a little bit of a problem with selling it, and I got this when I was trying to sell my company, is a lot of times the buyers look at you as you're the asset. You probably get that. They look at you and it's like, well, and then you try to explain, it's like, well, I have a whole company and I have a whole lot of very talented staff and you're buying that whole package. But sometimes they get kind of fixated on the founder themselves and making sure that you stay involved and all this kind of stuff. I didn't
Mhm.
mind doing that for a couple years. I went that route where I stayed on for like 3 years. But not everybody wants to do that. Some people either, if they're serial entrepreneurs, they may already have another idea in mind that they're ready to do, or they may want to clock out to, go fishing or whatever
Mhm.
their fun thing is
Mhm.
that they enjoy.
And how about the relationships with other co-founders? I mean, do you try to be as pragmatic as you can, so you just basically talk to each other about business events, business goals, and whatever is going on in the company, or do you try to become kind of friends at the same time? Like, do you try to make that relationship a little bit deeper, or do you purposely, I mean, on purpose, do you try to keep it very professional?
Well, we're not really, we don't fit in that last category very well. We've all known each other for a long time. I mean,
Hmm.
Paris I've known since probably 97, 98, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Kelly I've probably known for at least 15 years. She had been a co-founder of All in Diversity Project. And so I was on their
Hmm.
advisory board, so I got to know her. She worked at SBC for a little bit also. So we started out as longtime friends and then just felt
Okay.
like, we all kind of had this same idea about, oof, if we could only do something in this space. And so next thing I know, we were incorporating and here we are.
But aren't you risking, long-term relationship, maybe even friendship? Because from my perspective, doing business together is even more difficult than marriage. I mean, the number of difficult decisions that you're taking and the number of situations where it can naturally happen that you have simply different view, different angle, different aspirations than your partners. In my opinion, it happens even more often than in typical marriage.
Hmm.
So,
Well, and you bring up a good point because the initial company that I had, Rolling Good Times Online, I did end up getting a divorce from my co-founder on that one,
mhm,
and and it wasn't. I mean, that was my one and only divorce in my life, so it wasn't pleasant, to go through that and see that she and I were not friends previously. She just approached me when she had this idea about putting this gamblers magazine online. It's always a risk. It's always a risk, but so far, I mean, it's amazing how well we complement each other, because one, Paris comes from an operational standpoint in sports book for many, many years. Kelly came out of doing that sort of thing for a long time. She's been involved with, again, the All In Diversity Project, which she recently left. She spent a couple years at a VC firm. So, I mean, the three of us, between the three of us, we really complement each other in terms of what we can bring to the advisory side of things that we're
mhm,
doing. But, again, and partially, I always crack up when people go, "You have a great Rolodex," like anybody actually has a Rolodex anymore. But, we just have really good, deep relationships with
mhm,
a lot of folks in the industry, a lot of the right folks in the industry that are, open to supporting
mhm.
some new ideas. So, that's always a crapshoot. Life's a crapshoot. So
Did you in any way try to formalize between you, like where your competences begin, where they end, and the other founders, or you just go as
we
it?
wing it. We wing it. We have a
Right.
very active WhatsApp
Right.
group.
Okay.
Our main
Okay.
thing is, and I stole this from a friend of mine that had a fund in St. Louis and has done a lot in the sports world. He has a no assholes policy for what he does. So that was our number one prerequisite: no assholes involved with what we do. So it was kind of funny at ICE because we mentioned that to a couple people we sat down to meetings with, and they started to get up and walk away like they were self-selecting themselves out of the conversation. But yeah, that's the only real rule we have.
Mhm. And I know I kind of asked that question already, but I want to get a little bit deeper into it because you said that when it comes to planning the company, like planning the business model, planning the future, planning what kind of services you're going to provide, and all that. You said that to some extent you have it written down. To some extent you just go with the flow. But could you be a little bit more specific? As of course, as long as this is not a secret, because I'm thinking of all of the early startuppers that are listening to us. I think I said it in one of the episodes, but what I can see on the market, some of the people they tend to spend weeks, if not months, on planning and writing down, and they have this mission, and they have this vision, and they have these strategies and KPIs, and basically they feel like I have everything written down. I didn't go and sell anything. I didn't even check if there's a market fit for whatever I'm doing. But the plan is so perfect that it just gotta work. And then on the other hand, you have those people like me who just jump in straight into the fire. They just do the things without much thinking. And you sound like a person who kind of balanced out, kind of found the pretty sweet spot, how many things should be written down and which things should be consciously left to the chaos. So being a little bit more specific, what exactly did you write down?
Well, the risk of having planned too much is that, I mean, I'm an editor at heart, and I know as a writer and an editor that once you get things down, if somebody comes in and wants to slash and burn your article, it's painful. It's like, oh, we can't, you
Mhm,
can't cut that part out. So I use that analogy because I think the same thing happens when somebody comes in with like this massive plan and they're so invested in it that they're not able to pivot and adapt and find out what problem they really are solving and change it and do corrections in a way that's going to make it that much more useful solution to the industry. So that's the concern about getting too heavy into the planning part when you're a startup. And I think you just need to have a balance. Again, we came together thinking we were going to do a fund. Well, we're not going to do a fund now. Maybe down the road we'll do one, or hopefully we'll partner with somebody that has one. So it's just a situation where and every one of our arrangements that we've made with the startups we are working with is different. Some it's a contract for services for advisory, some there's equity, some there's a delayed payment, or they're all going to be different based on what their needs are, because we have some that are most of them are fairly early stage. We have some that are further along that are very specific with what they need. They need more relationship building within the industry, figuring out who are the right, should they be talking with regulators? Should they be, part of it also is looking at how, and this is something that I'm probably more helpful with, is how do you get yourself out there? What publications should you try to do an expert article on your particular thing? Which conferences should you try to speak at, so that you get some, and not all founders are comfortable doing that. That's the other problem. So, you really have to have some flexibility with this. And we're probably modeling that more than anybody, because, ours has already changed 5-10 times from when we first got together in the spring. So,
and there's nothing wrong in that, right?
it's perfect. It's to be expected. You can fight it, but that's the reality. You're going to need to be adaptive as you go along, or you're going to have issues.
And by the way, just one last question. When you talk to all those startups right now, what's the typical repeating problem that you can see? Is it like they're looking for connections for network in the industry, or is it more money, or
it's a mix. The ones that are looking for, there are some that are looking for investments, so we're working with them on their decks. Who are the appropriate people to contact, given where they're at, and because some of the investors, some are, they want to see some revenue first, or and that's part of what we're trying to do also, is work on the investor side, so we have a better idea of where they fit, what their criteria is, so that we can match up better. Some are, again, further along and are just looking more at strategic guidance on how they fit in the industry, and how best to connect with certain people. So they're all coming with a little bit different needs that we try to adapt to.
If I were to contact you and ask you for help, what would be the ideal profile of what I'm doing? Are you looking specifically for certain types of the startups right now, or is it enough to be a startup and you're going to take it from there and see what you can do to help?
We weren't sure how much we were going to have to go out and beat the bushes to even find any, but they seem to be finding us, so that's good. And some are kind of adjacent to the gaming industry. There's one that we're talking with that is developed a system for data athlete information that you might have on a wearable. Say you have a Aura ring or something like that, and what do they do with that? Who gets to see all that? How can they monetize it? Things like those kind of things. So it's related to sports betting in very minor way, but it's still, so we have a couple that are kind of on the cusp of, they connect with sports for sure. But so we're open to all ideas. Some are casino oriented, new game developers, new platform developers in that regard. One is a finance solution for players. So we're going to start, but one is a fantasy sports and community that's aimed strictly at women's sports, for example. So, we're getting a really interesting range, which is the part that's really been kind of enjoyable to see, because we look at them and you have to look at who the founder is, what they bring to the table, what do they get, what don't they get, in terms of what they need to do to move forward. So, they're all, and we do want to work more with like tier one companies in the industry to find out, because many of them don't have like an innovation arm. Some do. Some have some staff dedicated to that, but many don't. So if there's some that we can work with and say, what is it, what problems do you have that you need a solution for? And if we can go out and find them and bring them into them, that would be great. So we have some ambitious plans in that regard.
So, what's the process? I mean, if there is any process to apply, I mean, shall I just send you an email, poke you on LinkedIn, or
Yeah,
is
we
there
have a
any like
Defy the
specific?
Odds LinkedIn page, and we also have, it's under DTO Launchpad. I guess LLC.com is our website, but through LinkedIn, we're on LinkedIn all day. But yeah, I mean, our approach, any of the three of us, if anybody knows any of the three of us, you can approach us directly, and we're able to, we get together very regularly to discuss these things and see which ones might be ones that we feel like we can help.
So I encourage everybody to do so, and
Not
let's see what
everybody,
happens.
please. That would be overwhelming.
True, true, true.
But I mean,
um,
I think the other part of that is that there are now pitch competitions on all these conferences and
mhm.
stuff like that. So I really want to encourage people to look at that kind of stuff as a way to get out there and get their name out there and their product and or their project and see who might have some interest, because I think a lot of investors and a lot of folks with some of the bigger companies routinely watch those to see who the up and comers are.
Yes, they definitely do. Yeah. All right. That was a pleasure talking to you, ladies and gentlemen. Sue Schneider, thank you so much.
Thank you.